Hey, welcome back everybody, it's Garubis, back with another build video for you guys. So today I'm actually going to be putting together my new streaming setup. So I had a really old PC, gaming PC of mine actually, that I was using as my streaming setup, and I started to realize that I was having a hard time keeping 60 FPS stream even though I was only streaming at 720p. So I went ahead and decided it was time to upgrade. I've been streaming for over a year now on Twitch, and I thought, you know what, it's obviously something I'm going to be sticking with, so let's make sure I have the hardware to do it. I also figured that it was probably a good idea to have another computer on hand for editing and such, so I didn't have to do all of that on my gaming PC. I can kind of keep my gaming PC for gaming, and now I'll have this streaming and editing rig to do my streaming and editing on. I also have recently started doing some dual streams with my wife, where she has her own separate webcam, gaming on her own PC, and obviously it becomes very overwhelming for my old hardware to stream both webcams and the gameplay all at the same time. So, without further ado, we're going to quickly go over the hardware that I've got for this new build. First up, I have my MSI B450 Tomahawk. I've not used this particular motherboard before, but I've read a lot of good things about it, and I'm excited to try it out. I didn't include it here in the in the display, because, you know, why would I? But I also have my Ryzen 2700, and this is the Ryzen 7 2700 straight up. It's not the 2700X. I have a 2700X in my gaming PC, but because this is going to be only streaming and editing, I did a little bit of research and found that really the biggest benefit for streaming and editing is additional cores. The ultimate clock speed of the processor itself wasn't as important, so I decided to save myself a few bucks and go with the 2700 instead of the 2700X. Next, I'm going to be throwing in a 2 terabyte Seagate Barracuda drive. This is a spinning disk drive. I already have an existing SSD drive from the original streaming PC that I will continue to use for the OS. But again, this is probably going to also be an editing rig for me, so I just wanted some raw disk space. I didn't really need super high performance, so I went with the mechanical drive as opposed to an SSD. I also have two 120mm Alpha Cool fans right here in the front, and those are going to be attached to this Nexus ST30 240mm radiator, also from Alpha Cool, right down here. I have a very basic graphics card. Again, with it being an editing rig, I didn't really need anything too high-end for the graphics card, so this is just a Gigabyte RX 550 graphics card. No additional power, just a PCI Express only, so very simple, very basic, but it gets the job done. Again, I've been streaming with this exact rig for close to a year now. I then have an EK water block Supremacy MX CPU water block right here. I'm also taking the old reservoir, actually all of the water cooling parts are old parts out of my original gaming PC. If you watched one of my previous videos, I did a build in this Thermaltake Core X5 back here, and in that process I upgraded a couple of the radiators. I went with a monoblock for the CPU and motherboard, as well as a larger pump reservoir combo that also included some RGB, because why not? Who doesn't want more RGB? Actually, there's probably some of you out there, but I kind of dig it. And then I'm also trying out for the very first time some cable extensions. These particular cable extensions are from Link Up. I've not used them before. They had some pretty decent reviews on Amazon, so I went ahead and picked them up. And all of these parts are going to be built inside of this NZXT case. I honestly can't tell you what the model of this case is. I've had it for probably 2 to 3 years now, and I honestly forgot and didn't take the time to look it up, because honestly, the star of the show is not the case. The star of the show is really the AMD processor, the Tomahawk V450 motherboard, and then we also have, I don't have the box for them out here, but I do have 16 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance low profile RAM. So I'm also going to include a little bit of color here. I have some leftover orange UV reactive tubing that I'm going to use for the water cooling. And then I have it, oh yep, it's right over here. And this little box here is actually some UV LED strips that I'm going to put on the inside to make this thing glow a little bit. I'll also mention that the cable extensions that I got are also UV reactive. So I'm pretty excited to see how it's all going to look once it's put together, lights are turned on, and everything's kind of glowing. So without further ado, let's get this party started. I'm going to adjust the camera a little bit, clean up my workspace, and we're going to get started. So I'll see you guys back here in just a minute. Okay, welcome back. So for the next part, I, as you probably have already noticed, changed the camera angle up a little bit so that you guys can get a better view of the actual build process. So by default, all AMD motherboards come with their AM4 mounting brackets for the cooler installed. So first step is going to be actually to remove those. So that's pretty straightforward. You have to remove 4 screws, 2 on each mounting bracket. There we go. Those just pop right off once those screws are loosened up. And then on the back side, there is a back plate that comes off as well. So with that all out of the way, the next step is to install the mounting hardware for our water block. So again, these are all parts that were used on my previous build, which is actually my existing build back here behind me, my gaming PC. So let's go ahead and just get it mounted. So as you can see here, the water block also comes with its own back plate, and then it has 4 standoffs that screw into the back plate with a plastic washer that goes in between as you screw down through the motherboard. So let's go ahead and get those 4 screwed in to the back plate so we can get our processor in place and our water block mounted. They also include this rubber insulating pad here to prevent, since the backplate is metal and all of the standoffs are metal, they obviously don't want you shorting anything out on your motherboard. So there we go. As you can see, we have our 4 standoffs for our water cooling installed. Next is going to be to install our processor, our Ryzen 7 2700 chip here. So if you've ever mounted an AMD processor, you'll know that up in the top corner here, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but up here you can see there's a marking for one corner. And on your motherboard, you're also going to see a matching arrow. So really all you have to do is match up the arrow on the processor with the arrow in the AM4 socket. Get it all lined up, and it should just drop right in. And I always like to give it a little shimmy to make sure everything's socketed in right, which it is. So we're gonna lock this down. Next, we're gonna apply our thermal paste and just put a little pea-sized dot right here in the middle. We are going to take our water block, match it up over top of our 4 standoffs. Lower it down on our processor. Okay, with that in place, the next step will be to put these 4 springs that were included with the water block, 1 onto each standoff, and then we'll screw everything down with these caps that were, once again, included with our EK water block. So the one thing I will mention, as you're tightening these down, I always like to do opposite corners. And I'll also mention that these caps are designed to bottom out. So once you can feel them kind of bottom out and tighten as much as they're going to tighten, there's no reason to crank them down. It's only going to cause you issues in the future. Next, we're going to get our RAM in place. So I already went ahead and checked out the manual, and the recommendation, which is pretty much the recommendation for all motherboards, is when you're doing DDR RAM or dual data rate, dual channel RAM, you want to put your RAM sticks in slot 2 and slot 4 to get the best performance. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do here. So there we go. We got our processor along with our water block installed. We've got our 16 gigabytes of Corsair LPX Vengeance RAM. all installed and ready to go. I think the next step at this point is going to be to get our motherboard mounted into our case. Alright, welcome back. So as you can see, we got our NZXT case up here on the table, ready to mount in our motherboard. The first step before we actually put our motherboard into the case is going to be to install our I/O shield. So this simply snaps into place back here. So that in place, next step will be to mount our motherboard into our case. So you can slide this right in like this. Make sure all the I/O ports in the back here line up in the shield that we have in place. There we go. Now we're gonna screw it down. And there it is. Motherboard is now mounted in our case. So next step is going to be to get our graphics card installed. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Along with, we do have our Elgato HD60 capture card, which I don't believe I mentioned earlier in the video during the intro. So I do apologize for that, but we're going to go ahead and get that installed as well. So we'll do that now. So installing graphics card is pretty straightforward. Just got to get it in place, get it lined up with your slot. And I'm going to not talk through this, but once you do get it lined up, when you press down, you are going to hear a little click, and that'll let you know that it's in place. So I don't know if you heard that, but it did click into place. There is a little clip on the back of the PCI Express slot that locks it into place. And while we're here, we'll go ahead and get our capture card installed as well. There we go. All of our expansion cards are now installed. Next step will be to screw them in, and you can probably see here there is an empty PCI Express slot or expansion slot here in the case. I will be tracking down one of these covers to get in place here as well, and I'll go ahead and screw that down. So I'm not going to bore you with this getting those guys screwed down into place, and I'm also not going to bore you with watching me run cables. So off camera here, I'm going to get all of our cable runs done, and then I'll bring you guys back and we'll get all of our water cooling installed. All right, welcome back everybody. So let me catch you up on everything that I have completed while you were away. So first off, I did get that I/O protector here in place. I also got all of my power cables ran. You can see here, these are my green cable extensions that I got. There's one there and one up here. Also got all of my power button connectors, LED connectors. This is my USB, my front USB port connector down here. I got our hard drives all hooked up here. And then I got my power cables connected to all of my drives as well. I also got that new Seagate 2 terabyte hard drive installed. So we should have plenty of space. Finally, went ahead and put an exhaust fan up on top to go along with the one exhaust fan here out on the back. So the next step is, like I said, I was gonna bring you guys back for the water cooling portion of the installation. So you can see here I have our 240 millimeter radiator, and I don't know if I've ever actually gone over this in any of my videos, maybe my very first water cooling installation video when I originally installed the 360 millimeter cooling in my original gaming PC case. But I wanted to go over really just installing the fitting, I guess, for the water cooling tubes. There's really not a whole lot to it, but if you've never done it before, I just wanted to kind of show you how it's done. So it's really pretty basic. The kit that I purchased actually came with this hex wrench here. I'm not 100% sure what size it is, but if you look very closely, and unfortunately there's just no way I'm ever going to be able to get this to show up on camera, there are actually very small grooves on the inside of these fittings, and they fit this hex perfectly. So pretty much all you'll do, and I'll demonstrate here quickly on our radiator, is take your fitting, the threaded side obviously towards wherever you're trying to get it in, screw it into. Start it by hand, kind of get it hand tight, and then you'll take your hex wrench, fit it in, and then just quickly give it a half turn or so just to tighten it down, make sure that O-ring compresses. That's really all there is to it. So again, it's obviously, like I said before, very simple, but I thought, why not take the opportunity to show you guys how it's done. All right, so now that I have both my fittings installed on my radiator, the plan is to install this radiator up front, and we're gonna put our fans on the outside here between the case and the radiator. And then we're going to have the pump res combo, which I have right over here, is going to sit and mount to the inside of that radiator right here, which I think will look pretty nice. It'll take up a lot of that empty space, but also leave those cables exposed so that you can enjoy the fancy cable extensions I installed. So I think that the easiest way to do this is going to be to mount this pump res combo and bracket. You can see this L bracket here, which I purchased separately specifically for this build, is to mount all of this to the radiator before I install anything in the case. I have a feeling that if I were to try and install it inside the case, these back screws are going to be borderline impossible to get to. And you have to try to get these tiny little screws reached, around the back into these tiny little holes, and it's just going to be kind of a pain in the butt. So I'm going to go ahead and get this mounted to my radiator before installing the fans and radiator into the case. So for this, I have a couple of these small little screws that came with my radiator, and this little hex wrench here that also came with my radiator. So really, it's as easy as going around, getting the pump res mount lined up correctly on the radiator, and then screwing down. So I'm gonna go ahead and get all 4 of these started, and then I'll go back around after and tighten them all down. So let's get that done. There we go. That is our pump res radiator combo. So next step is to get this mounted inside the case with our fans. So I'm actually going to start with the bottom one, just because I think it's going to be a little bit easier. For these mounts, we do have these nice long screws, and they're long enough that they can go through the case, through the fan, into the radiator, and tighten down nice and tight. And we have our hex wrench that will fit these screws, and everybody's happy. So I'm going to start first by getting a screw through the fan, through the case. And then I'm going to try to lift my radiator up, line everything up, screw it in. Let's see if I'm dexterous enough. See if I have a high enough dexterity roll to get this done, huh? Those D&D nerds out there. Okay, there's one screw in, good sign. Let's see if we can get the second screw in as easily, and if we do, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to our other fan. Get 2 screws mounted in the upper fan, then I will go around and get the last 2 screws in each fan. Oh wow, that was honestly went better than I expected. So just to give you guys a slightly different perspective here, I'll angle this around a little bit and see if it's possible for me to do it this way. Let's see how we're gonna fish this. This is a bit of a tight squeeze here. Maybe I should have went with the bottom or the top first, but could have been worse. I'll try to fish this down about this little hole down here. There we go, easy peasy. Okay, there's our top fan in place. Kind of feel around. I think I got it there. We'll take our hex screw, tighten it down, and it does look like we hit gold here. Bada bing, bada boom. All right, let's get one up here in this top opposite corner, and boy, again, that honestly all went easier than I expected. So I'm actually going to loosen these, all 4 of these screws that I do have in here, just to allow myself some flexibility as to the height of our radiator fans and pump. So I'm gonna get these last 4 screws in. Then we get to run some tubes. And there it is. Our pump res combo along with our radiator and fans are now all mounted in our case. So really quickly before I actually start running the tube, because I'm probably because I'm probably gonna run the tube and do it as a little speed up montage thing because it's kind of boring. The runs are, so this is the in, and this back port here on our pump res combo is the out. So this out port is gonna come out, come into this, which is the input for our CPU water block. Then this is the output for our CPU water block. This is gonna come up and over into our back port here on our radiator. And then this front port on our radiator is gonna come down and come into the in port on our pump. So that's the plan. The only run that I'm really not a fan of, and if I had another 90 degrees that I could put here, I would have. But unfortunately, I just don't. The only run I really don't like is the one from the out port into the CPU block itself. It's gonna kind of protrude out a little bit to make this curve without kinking the tubing, but it is what it is. Sometimes you gotta work with what you got. I thought the 290s that I had already purchased ahead of this project was gonna be enough. Ultimately, I discovered that to not be the case. So, with that said, let's get our tubing ran, and then I'll probably off camera do a little bit of cable management, because I mean, let's be real, running cables through a case, not the most exciting thing to watch. All right, welcome back. Sorry for the awkward cut there, but I didn't realize that my memory card and my camera ran out of space in the middle of recording. So I'm not 100% sure where I left off, but I'm doing my best to pick up and continue on. So this is the tubing I was talking about. It is a nice fluorescent orange, UV sensitive. Again, I am going to be adding some black lights to the inside of the case, so it should look pretty slick along with the UV sensitive cables for the power supply. So let's go ahead and start getting our tube connected and cut. And this is kind of an inexact science, as you'll quickly discover. I got some handy cutters here. I always err on giving a little bit more than I need. The reason being is I can always cut it down more later, but if I cut it too short, obviously that's gonna be a problem. All right, that looks good. So before I connect this, actually, I should probably feed my compression fittings onto the tube first. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to go through, disconnect everything after I've already connected it, feed them on then, and redo the whole process. So let's just prevent ourselves from having to do double work and thread them on there, get them on there now. Again, this run right here, this is my least favorite run. All right, with that tube done, so as you can see, it fits nicely in there. Next are the run from the water block itself over to our radiator, and then our radiator down to our pump res combo. Both these runs are super simple. We don't have any weird bulges out. This is a straight run here, and this is a straight run there. So should be pretty straightforward, and should allow me to get some nice and clean runs here. Assuming I have enough tubing. Yeah, I should have enough. And as I mentioned before, I like to err on the side of cutting it just a little bit long, which I did here, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to kind of turn this away from you for a sec just to be able to get this on here. Okay, there's run number 2 done. Like I said, that's a nice clean run. I like that. Again, still not a fan of that, but I really don't have anything else I can do about it unless I had another 90 that I could put here and have a straight run here, which, knowing me, I will probably go out and pick up a 90-degree fitting and get that done. But I don't have one today, and I really need to get this set up because until this computer is done being built, I don't have a streaming PC, and well, I can't go too long without that. So, all right, let's cut this last tube here. Oh my gosh, tube left over. I love that. One thing I do like about these 90s, they are also EK branded, is they rotate a little bit here. I'll show you. they rotate a little bit, so you can get, like on this one, it can angle up to get this nice curve here. You know, I don't have to worry about if it didn't have that flex in there and you just tightened it, and wherever the thread stopped is the angle that you had to live with, well, that could make for make for some problem. All right, there you have it. There is our loop. So the next steps are going to be to get our pump, well, really, to get the loop filled. We're gonna fill the loop. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna stop the camera for just a sec. I'm gonna get out a secondary power supply that we'll actually use to get everything filled. Pretty much the way it works is there's an adapter that now comes actually with every motherboard you buy nowadays that you plug into the power supply, and it makes it seem as if it's plugged into a powered on system. So when you flip on the little switch on the power supply itself, it powers on, feeds power to everything else, and then you hook up your pump to that power supply as well, and you fill it with water, flip on the switch, let the water pump through, flip it off, fill up your reservoir, flip it on, etc. until it's filled and everything's running. Then you let it run for you know, a good, they recommend 24 hours. I usually let it run for 1 or 2 hours. I figure after 1 or 2 hours, if there's no leaks, there's not going to be any leaks. So what I'm going to do is, off camera here, I am going to get our power supply out, get that all set up. I'm going to double check all of our fittings here to make sure these are all tightened down. Get our power supply out, get everything hooked up, and then I will bring you guys back to go through the loop filling with me and make sure there's no leaks. So I'll see you guys in just a minute. All right, welcome back everybody. So I did exactly as I said. I went through and make sure all these were tight, which they all actually were very tight. Got my extra power supply over here plugged in. I got my, like I said, I got this little adapter here hooked up to the 24-pin power connector. And they also give a little, I can kind of show it back here. There's this little SATA adapter back here that plugs into the power for the pump. That allows me to then plug this directly into the same power supply. That way when I flip it on, our pump will pump. So, without further ado, let's get this loop filled. So I got my, yeah, it does not smell good. So there's some additive in this water that's meant to prevent any kind of algae or anything from growing in the liquid inside the loop. So I would definitely make sure if you're going to water cool that you have some kind of an additive that prevents that kind of growth. And then the additive is then mixed with distilled water. So let's get it added in. Okay, so like I said, you fill that up. So our reservoir is nice full. Oh, look at that. That's funny. So the liquid's already starting to pump through. And then we hit this external power supply here. One thing I will warn, and I've mentioned this in every single video that I've done on filling a water cooling loop, is you want, when you do flip it on, you want to pay attention to your reservoir, because you do not want this to run dry. The pump itself relies on the water from the reservoir to lubricate itself. So if you let this thing pump dry, you could run into issues where you damage your pump. And these are not cheap, so you probably don't want to be doing that. Alright, and as you go along, I'm fairly confident in myself because I did double check all the fittings, but as you go along, you should also be checking for any kind of leaks. I'm not seeing any drips or anything yet, so I'm just gonna keep on keeping on. Okay, and this is a pretty small loop, so that's all we needed. We didn't even need the majority of this. So I'm gonna play a dangerous game here and try to top off the last little bit here, because I can. So there it is. Our loop is now full. So there we go. So like I said, now really all you have to do is kind of let this run for a period of time. Again, recommendation is 24 hours. I usually let it run for 2 or 3. Again, I figure by 2 or 3 hours, if there's going to be a leak, it'll leak. So I'll talk to you guys in a couple of hours. Alright, welcome back everybody. So it's been a couple hours since I originally filled the loop, and I let it run, went and got some dinner, etc. And so far so good. Everything looks dry, everything looks clean, just the way we want it. So before I got recording again, I went ahead and hooked up a monitor, which the way my layout is, it's going to be difficult to show you the monitor, so you just have to take my word for it that it works. But I got all the cables plugged back in, I got the pump back connected to the motherboard just like it's supposed to be, and got the power connected back to the power supply in this PC. So I can give you my word, I have not powered this on. So this is going to be the moment of truth. I'm going to find out here live with you guys whether or not this thing actually works. So without further ado, I'm going to flip the switch, give our power button a push. Alright, so far so good. You can see the UV lights back there. No monitor signal yet. Got a flash on the keyboard. We obviously have lights, we got fans spinning. Feel the air pulling in. Hey, and we got video. Excellent. So it looks like everything is working. Obviously it's telling me that I need to go in and get into configuration here, and it's recognizing our processor is a Ryzen 7 2700 8-core 16-thread processor, currently running at 3.2 gigahertz. The RAM is right now running at its stock 2133, but again, this is 3000 megahertz RAM, so I'll use the XMP profile and bump that up to our 3000 megahertz. But that is going to do it for this video. I'm happy to say that I was able to get everything built pretty straightforward. I definitely had more than enough tubing, which I'm pretty excited about. Again, I got that one run I wasn't super happy about, but you know, that's the way it goes. Like I said, I'm sure at some point in the future I'll go and get one more 90-degree fitting and fix that the way I want it to be. But for now, I'm very happy. As you can see, I also got the UV lights in there shining onto everything. With the lighting of that I've set up for the video shoot, it makes it a little bit difficult to see, but I'm excited to see once the lights are off, take a look, see what everything looks like. Now it's time to get it hooked up and see what it can do. I'm excited to get it booted up, get my stream set up, and see how it performs. It should be significantly better than my previous one. So, with that said, thank you guys for hanging out, building this PC with me today. I got another video in the works right now. I'm going to be installing some water cooling on my wife's graphics card because why not? And until then, please feel free to hit the like, dislike, whatever you feel like. Hit the subscribe button if you like what you see. I definitely have plans to get content out more frequently. Unfortunately, over the past 2 months, we have been doing a kitchen remodel, which prevented me from actually having time to record and edit and post and do all that stuff. So, definitely should be a lot more content coming soon. So please do hit that subscribe, hit the bell if you want to get notifications. And until next time, cheers.